Welcome to the Infinite and Beyond MIT Alumni Show. I'm Rob Kalwarowski, class of 2010, executive coach, author, and speaker. Business pressure, competitive threats, artificial intelligence, political upheavals. Chaos is all around us. But inside the uncertainty, disruption, and unpredictability, a powerful self-leadership strategy is transforming people and organizations. Are you ready to capitalize on chaos? I have something exciting to tell you about. As part of my book launch, Capitalizing on Chaos, I will be in cities across the United States and Canada to speak and do book signings. And here are a few upcoming public events. August 21st, I'll be at the Frontier Tower in San Francisco. August 24th, I'll be at the MIT Club of Southern California in Los Angeles. October 21st, I'll be doing the MIT Club in Boston. And October 27th and 28th, I'll be at the Real Finance and Mental Health Summit in New York City. So if you're in any of these cities and either your company or you want to attend the event, I will be putting the links as soon as I have them. In addition to San Francisco, Los Angeles, Boston, and New York City, I will also be in Seattle, Portland, Atlanta, Houston, Ottawa, Edmonton, and Vancouver. And so if you're based in these cities and you know any groups, or if your company's interested in a talk and a book signing, let me know. Send me a note, rob@robkalwarowski.com, and we can chat about it. Thank you so much for your support. And here's the rest of the episode. Welcome to the Infinite and Beyond MIT Alumni Show. And of course, we have another special guest with us. Today, we have a Sloanie in the mix. Joe Bohringer is with us. Joe's an executive coach. And also, one of the things that's kind of most interesting about him is he spent 31 seasons in Major League Baseball, and he's won a World Series championship with the Chicago Cubs. And then also, your upcoming book, Winning Inc., is coming up. So, Joe, first off, thanks for having us.
I really appreciate the invite. Hope I can give the listeners something worthwhile today.
Absolutely. And Joe, so we always start off with this question, but can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I graduated from Sloan in 1993, got my degree there, and I was really fortunate that the first industry that I picked happened to be the industry I stuck with for my whole career. I started out working in professional baseball, doing kind of rosters and contracts. It grew into evaluating players, and then at the end of my career, did a lot of staff development, did a lot of player performance, kind of linking everything together, kind of end to end for the athlete. And I was very fortunate, worked with a lot more winning organizations and losing organizations during my career, although I've experienced both first and last place finishes during that stretch. But I really just learned a lot about elite performing teams, high performing and elite performing teams, but also high performing and elite performing individuals. And my transition to kind of doing what I'm doing now in 2020, the COVID year, for those that might remember were sports fans, a lot of sports teams were in the bubble. I was in the bubble. I lived in a hotel for 4 months. I was spitting in a tube every 48 hours, hoping that I tested negative. I was literally, if you remember, I was sitting in stadiums with cardboard cutouts of fans, like empty stadiums with cardboard cutouts of fans, because people were sending in pictures so that the seats would be filled in on the TV broadcasts. So at the end of that season, I just was really in a fortunate spot to be able to decide what I wanted to do. I got home with my family and had a couple years left on my contract, but decided it was time to kind of move on to whatever my next phase was, and was actually contacted by an executive coaching and consulting kind of advising firm, and they actually look for people that come from military, law enforcement, professional sports, kind of high stakes, high paced, fast paced industries. They feel that that's kind of their niche in trying to help executives is being able to slow things down when things are moving fast. And in professional sports, it moves as fast as you can get, and where I think most fans realize kind of the stakes for players, where if you don't perform well enough to hold your spot, you go away and they give it to the next player. It's very, very similar in the front office. So having done that for as long as I did was very fortunate to kind of learn and survive and I guess thrive in that environment, to stick around as long as I did. But I kind of was told, hey, you know what? high performance environments are performance environments. High performers are high performers. Athletes might be trying to do it with their bodies, but executives might be doing it, trying to do it with their mind or their systems or their processes, trying to get their company to be best in class. And a lot of the dynamics within that are very similar. And I found that to be true as I've transitioned. I think that championship caliber organizations have a subset of kind of universal traits, universal qualities, regardless of industry, and being able to tap into those qualities and then ultimately turn them into performance on the back end is what championship companies do. And I've been really fortunate to be able to transition that way. I found that to be true. I found it to be really intriguing at this stage of my career to be able to work with people. I'd always worked with young players, coaches, scouts, trying to get to their next level, and have now done the same thing with executives at all points of the experience curve, but really helping companies to achieve their next level or helping people to achieve their next level, whatever that looks like.
100%. Yeah. I always joke about this, but it's like the psychology that makes us able to get into MIT is like the same psychology that makes folks perform at the highest levels. It's just in different areas. And so the one thing though, Joe, I want to get into, right, is you said that you did experience a last place. And I always believe that, I mean, obviously you know this too, but it's like when we lose or when we have these quote unquote failures, there's a lot to learn from those. Can you share some of the lessons you learned from those last place finishes, which help you today coaching the top?
Yeah, so absolutely. First of all, it's about feedback loops. The feedback loop is built in professional sports because you have a scoreboard. I mean, our KPI is a scoreboard that literally tells us whether we did our job that day. And, you know, our customer satisfaction score is, or our NPS is the standings. If we're doing well in the standings, our fans, our customers like us. If we're not doing well in the standings, our customers don't. And they're usually pretty vocal about it. So the game itself, the industry is brutally honest. So you get that feedback. Now, in some settings, you have to find ways to create that feedback for yourself. But it's taking that feedback and then getting better. The standards are the standards, the line that it takes, and it's often very nuanced and very, very thin, but it's a thin line between winning and losing when you're competing at that level. And it's just the clarity that you get, and you can't keep your head in the sand. If you lose 10 straight, you have no choice but to kind of look inward and figure out, you know, what's going on. So that's one thing, oddly enough, that I actually think is easier in the industry of pro sports because it's built into the industry itself. Whereas in a lot of industries, you need to be more intentional about what feedbacks really matter, like what is signal, what is noise, how do you separate that, and then turning those into the standards that you know you need to either meet or achieve to either maintain or to reach the next level. So, you know, those last place finishes are wildly educational. And I think the one thing that pro sports does is you have no choice but to actually take the lesson because there's nowhere for you to hide, and you can't really paper over it. If you're in last place, you are in last place, and is there for everyone to see. And you either get better or you don't. There's a kind of a bluntness to it that makes those moments. You can't ignore those moments. But to your point, I think in general, people that gravitate to that industry are wired to want that feedback anyway and to want to achieve. But again, there's nowhere to hide if you do decide to get in. And if you are not up to par, if you can't perform enough to hold your spot, there will be somebody else waiting in the wings. So highly competitive, super fast paced, and you learn a lot of lessons. You either learn the lessons that you have to learn, or else the industry kind of spits you out, unfortunately.
That sounds like a lot of fun, actually.
If you're wired to be a masochist, yes, it is very fun. So,
Yeah,
but no,
yeah. As a psycho like I am.
yeah, for people that enjoy a challenge, the challenge is built in. The entire industry is literally built around the challenge of competition. When you win a title, you celebrate it for 5 minutes, and everybody goes back into the pool to start all over again the next cycle. So, if you're in for 31 seasons, I didn't have the same season 31 times. I had 31 very different seasons, and there were ones that were wildly successful, even though we might not have finished great in the standings, because we were just making progress because our measuring stick was trying to get better than we were the year before and creating enough gap to be able to achieve the goals we ultimately were looking to achieve.
Tell me more about that, Joe, because I think a lot of us struggle with especially now, I mean, and in pro sports, right? It's like, if you don't win at all, it's like, well, you're just garbage, right? But it's like, even internally, like something that a lot of us struggle with is like, if we're not quote unquote winning or performing or being the best, we get really down on ourselves. And, I'm sure everybody listening is like this because that's why you got into MIT. But tell me a little bit more about that. Like, I always, when it's like, I'll give you this example because I think it's wildly funny, but it's like, there's like, I've been watching that F1 show on Netflix, right? And it's like, there's some of the teams and it's like, they're, the bottom end teams, and it's like their coach version of a coach is like, hey guys, we're going to go out today and we're going to try to get 10th. And I'm like, oh my, I just like laugh at it. I'm like, I couldn't imagine giving this speech because it's like, oh my God. But like, how do you wrap your mind around that as like a success?
Sure. First of all, it's a great question, and it's something I've actually touched upon a little bit when I've written or when I've worked with groups. It's I'm going to call it like the difference between like internal judgments or internal milestones and external. We know how, and I'll use the F1 example. There's 10 teams. We know how the 10 teams stack up, and if you're the 10th team, all you can do is get to 9th. You have to get to 9th before you can get to 1st. So some of that is you can get through the external of like, where are we in the rankings? Or really the internal is just, how do we get better every day? Because I can't control where we fall in the standings. I can only control how I go about my day or how my team goes about their day and the result that comes from that. And oftentimes we can't control the result. We can only control the process that we use to get there. So, I can use the example when they say that, I totally understand that. I had a chance, I went to the Chicago Cubs in 2011 and we were terrible. They hired a gentleman named Theo Epstein, who a lot of MIT alums or grads will know because Theo kind of cut his teeth with the Red Sox and won a couple World Series there. And he comes to Chicago, and Chicago hadn't won a World Series in over a century. And I remember interviewing, and I was like, "Hey, what are you looking for?" And he's like, just pardon my French. He's like, "Hey, I think 5-year plans are bullshit. I'm looking for people who can run a 5-year plan in 3. And if you can do that, there might be a place here. And if you can't, well, there might not be." And I was like, hey, you know what? Like that timeline's fine with me. Like sign me up. And kind of that's what we did. We went from a last place finish in 2012 to winning a World Series in 2016. And that was one of the quickest turnarounds in the history of professional sports. But it was never about the act of winning the championship. It was doing everything, just getting better every day and moving closer to being a championship organization. And before you can win a championship, you actually have to be a championship player or a championship executive or a championship organization. So I think when we hear those things, it's the focus of what can we do to get better today to move closer to whatever our goal is. And if your goal needs to be 9th, if you're 10th, it needs to be 9th before it can be 8th, and it needs to be 8th before it can be 7th. But ultimately, if the goal, and this is where a lot of times, if your goal is to get to 5th and you get to 5th, well, then what do you do? Because there's still 4 more slots to go before you can get to the top. And so really it's about that idea of kind of internal, external. The internal goal and the elite performers that I've engaged or had a chance to interact with, whether they be players or executives or organizations, the goal is not really a specific outcome as much as just to get better every day. Control what we can do to be the best version of ourselves. And I know that has a buzzword quality to it. In that respect, the buzzword is actually correct, but the separator is how few people, individuals, and organizations can actually live that reality of just getting better to be the absolute best that they can be. And I think that's when you hear those things, I think that's kind of the dynamic at play, is that the external rankings, whatever they might be, are really milestones to gauge how you're doing internally and trying to meet whatever your goal is of just getting better and reaching a certain level of achievement.
Yeah, it's definitely an inner thing. I mean, you see it like Nick Saban, right? Is trust the process, right? And it's like that's all he's said for his entire career, and he's the most successful college coach of all time. So obviously he knows a thing or two.
Right.
about building a winning team.
Right. And again, like that's one, he has another saying, it's trust the process. He also has gone on record of saying it takes what it takes.
Yeah.
So if you want to win a national championship, it takes what it takes. It's, the importance of standards. And again, that's in any industry. There's certain standards that you have to meet. And in working toward those standards never lower themselves to our level of performance. We have to raise our performance to meet or achieve a set of standards, and recognizing what those standards are. And that's sometimes some things I've done with groups. A company might want to reach their next level of scale. Okay, what's the standard? What do you need to do to reach the next level of scale? Oh, well, we need to do A, B, and C. Well, okay, I didn't tell you to do A, B, and C because I don't know your industry as well as you do. You said you need to do A, B, and C. So how do we get closer to A? How do we get closer to B? How do we get closer to C? And sometimes with individuals or groups, they know what the standards are, kind of in vaguely, and it's actually getting those standards out and articulating them, and then working backwards as to what actions you can take to try and meet or exceed those standards, and that's how we get better. It's how we grow. It's how we move from one level to the next. And I've found that to be, again, a kind of a universal trait, regardless of industry or regardless of individual. If you want to get to the next level, it does boil down to meeting whatever standards are attached to that level. And oftentimes we know the standards. The kind of fear, uncertainty, doubt comes from the fact that until we've met a standard, we actually don't know if we can. And I'll go back, you mentioned about MIT. We didn't know if we could get into MIT, and then we didn't know if we could get through pass fail, and then we didn't know if we could get the degree. So again, there's always that fear, uncertainty, doubt, but the only thing that you can do is control how you position yourself in relation to those, rather that you can't control the doubts themselves or the standards themselves. You can only control how you approach them and how you position yourself in relation to them.
That's actually one of the things I work most with my clients is the self-trust.
Mm-hmm.
And in part of that, right, is exactly what you mentioned, is like, we can put the standards out there, but we need to trust that we can rise to the occasion. And often it's like these beliefs and, psychology we've had since childhood that has some of these barriers. And like everybody I talk to from MIT is like, well, I got in and then I failed the intro math test or my first physics exam. And I was, man, is everybody else smarter than me? Did they make a mistake with me? And a lot of that is the same in entrepreneurs or corporate world, right? Am I just here because I got lucky, or it's some version of imposter syndrome? And some of that, obviously it's not for everybody, but some of that is just building the internal trust that you can do hard things. And it does start internally here before it moves into the external of, now this is how I show up with my team.
And I think expanding on that, tying those together, you can believe that you can accomplish hard things or do hard things and still fail at trying a
Absolutely.
hard thing. You mentioned entrepreneurs, like there's history's littered with entrepreneurs that it wasn't the first company that hit it big. It was the second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth company that hit it big. And they didn't quite, they never lost the belief that they could do hard things. It's just, okay, well, that wasn't the right thing. I'm going to go try the next hard thing. And I do think that high and elite performers do have that basic wiring that if they do get knocked down, they're just not afraid to get back up and try again, because they do have that belief in themselves that eventually they'll be able to get over the hump and accomplish whatever they're trying to accomplish.
Yeah. As an athlete too, right? It's like you learn that from very young.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, as an athlete, you just know you just got to get back and get working again.
And it's, it's funny that does translate. I've worked with athletes in the corporate world, but their studies, Harvard, there's a leadership institute in Britain. I know there was a big one at University of Rhode Island. It's just people that have come up through athletics understand the competition of business. They understand team dynamics a little better. They understand it doesn't always work out. They understand sometimes you need to integrate a new teammate. Not that they're experts at it, but the world's a competitive place. And having come up through the ranks, if you played youth sports or high school sports, that learning the organizational dynamics and team dynamics ends up being a valuable tool. Even if you don't quite know how to articulate, you've done it before, and that you understand what it's like to be on a team that's operating under some sort of pressure, and what the puts and takes are within that to be able to try and win your game, whatever that game might be.
Absolutely. Joe, like, Can you tell us a little bit about your upcoming book, Winning Inc., and then maybe give us a couple of the lessons that you share in it?
Sure. I kind of came about it I kind of backdoored it. It wasn't really something I set out to do. And I think as I started going through this, what I found was that I kept coming back to the same core principles, and I kept coming back to the same anecdotes that support them, and working through some of those team dynamics or organizational dynamics issues that I mentioned. And I think what really spurred it for me was that I was one of those people that, I guess for better or for worse, I had people every once in a while. It was like, you should write that down. You should write a book. And I was like, yeah, whatever. And I think the two things that spurred it for me was actually, believe it or not, was a podcast like this. I did a podcast and was asked a question, and I kind of told an anecdote about the story behind it. And I was contacted by a professor at a business school who asked if I would speak to his class about that topic and using that story around that. I did that. I spoke with a class, and then I had a separate podcast where I told a different anecdote or a different story. And that one, in the comments, there was a professor of sports management at a school in Texas who basically made a comment that said, hey, if you've been in one of my classes, you need to listen to this. And if you're going to be in one of my classes, you will be listening to it because it's going to be on our curriculum starting in the fall. And so, now what I realized was I kept getting asked the same questions. The stories kind of resonated. And I was like, I wonder if, there's enough of them there. So what I ended up doing was, kind of doing off the baseball theme. I have 9 kind of principles that I believe are universal for high-performing teams and high-performing individuals. It's written through a leadership lens. It applies to individual leaders, but it also applies to leading teams and high-performing organizations. And each one of those principles, it's kind of, here's a real brief introduction into what the principle is. Here's a real-life anecdote or story behind it showing a resolution. And then here are 3 kind of questions to ask yourself if you're, to one, kind of stress test where you might be in regard to this principle, but 2, also start to move you in a direction to strengthen that principle if it's something that you are looking to get into, or you're looking to accomplish. So that was kind of what it came to. And it covers kind of the mindset of high performing teams. There's a little bit about, kind of setting up your system. There's a little bit about how to operate, and there's a little bit about how to really think about long term. And it touches on things like, what's the winning mindset? It touches on, as we just touched on earlier, like the importance of standards and kind of demanding championship behaviors. If you don't, there's a quote by a Bill Walsh, who was a famous football coach with the Dynasty 49ers, San Francisco 49ers, and he said, champions behave like champions before they are champions. And that's very true. You have to set the foundation of championship behaviors to ultimately get to championship outcomes, whatever your definition of championship is. So it touches on that a little bit, touches on, which is something big, like how do you use all your information, both subjective and objective, and how do you balance those things out? There's an anecdote around that. And again, in the age of AI, it's only going to get more relevant. Ultimately, it's about turning information into action, and the teams and people and organizations that do that the best are the ones that usually get the best outcome. So again, there's 9 of them that kind of came through, and they were ones that I had people keep coming back to and asking me. Yeah, I was didn't set out to kind of do it, but I got asked often enough, and there's a lot of storytelling in the book. So it's a business book told through the business of sports rather than being a sports book. But I think whether you're an executive or even a casual sports fan, I think there's hopefully some lessons to take away, because I know those lessons have been proven in the real world, not only in my career, but with some of the companies and individuals that I've worked with and trying to put these principles into play.
One of my favorite things to do with folks is to look out into the future, into the long term. Like, can you share how you work with that, or what's your principle for that?
For me personally, or just in general? With
Either, both.
Okay. Well, and this is one, I think you were class of 2010, right?
Yep.
I was 1993, so I've got some miles on you. It looks like we both have the same.
We're still
thing.
bald.
I got a lot more gray, I think, in the beard. I think that organizations, people, they pass through stages. I had someone that gave me this framework, and I think it's 100% true. We pass through this stage at first. We just want to survive. We just want a seat at the table. We want to roll with the company, whatever it might be. Then we want to sustain. We kind of want to establish ourselves and what is our baseline and setting up who we are. Then we want to succeed. whatever that looks like. Make money, have a title, be part of something bigger than yourself, whatever your definition of success is. And then the last stage is significance. Where do you get your fulfillment? If you've done things the right way, where do you get up in the morning and really do what you want to do? And I think for me personally, I had a lot of success in Major League Baseball. I put myself in a situation where I got to position myself. I was very fortunate. I had the luxury of deciding, you know what, I want to do what I want to do. And I want to work with teammates that I want to work with. And I want to believe that I earned the right to put myself in that position. And so in this transition here, for me personally, it's about significance. It's about the fulfillment of being part of a group that achieves big things. And as I mentioned before, I've had winning seasons and I've had losing seasons. And sometimes, especially early on, you don't get to choose what group you work with. Now I get to choose what individuals or teams that I want to work with. And as much as they're vetting me for someone that they're speaking to, I'm also vetting them. I want to be in situations where they have a chance to achieve, a positive outcome. So for me personally, I feel like I'm happen to be at that significant stage where I crave interesting conversations, trying to work toward interesting outcomes, and I'm trying to position myself that way. But I also appreciate the fact every organization or individual that I talk with might be at a different stage, and it's meeting them at their stage and helping them achieve whatever their next level is. So I know that was kind of a broad general answer to the question. I'm happy to delve into any specifics, but hopefully that kind of gets to what you were asking.
No, it was a great answer. And I mean, I think it's part of the natural evolution of, self-actualization. I mean, obviously some folks would say transcendence is the last step, but I think you can only ever peer into that world and before you come back, or at least that's what a lot of the wisdom traditions talk about. No, I love it. I think it's incredible, and it's a great way of thinking about it.
And I will say this, I realized how fortunate I was that the first path I picked happened to be the one that I stayed on for 31 seasons. I know that that's the exception rather than the rule. And I think that gets back to what we talked about earlier. If you fall down and you get up, you have a choice of whether you want to keep going on that same path or whether the get up actually, after you get up, you want to go off in a slightly different direction. I know that there are people that might more zigzag their way through, and I don't think mine was a straight line. I started out doing administration. I was in the office for 10 years. I was out in the field for 10 years. I was back in the office for 10 years. I started in a junior role, went to leadership roles. I started out in scouting. I moved to player development. I moved to scouting. Then I moved to player performance. So even though I stayed in the industry, I was very, and I'll use another buzzword, like cross-functional in where they kind of used me. And I was much more generalist than being specific, even though I was in the same industry the whole time. I really did kind of run the gamut in where I went. And I think that applies to a lot of people as they make that trek. I don't believe there's one right path for every person or organization. I do believe every person or organization has a right path, and helping them explore that and find the path that works for them. When you believe that you're on the right path, it does make it a lot easier when you get knocked down to get back up and keep going. So I think that's a big part of it.
And to finish your career as the cardboard cutout is a tough one.
Yes, I sat next to a lot of cardboard cutouts at the end. I was like, is this really what I want to do? I'd rather interact with live people again. But, again.
That sounds so dystopian when you were describing
my
it.
God,
it's just like, this is crazy.
Yeah. I mean, and again, this is a little bit maybe off track, but the big thing was I was on the West Coast. I'm in Seattle. I'm working for the Mariners at the time, and I'm in Seattle. And that summer, there were wildfires ripping up and down the coast in Oregon and California, and we're all wearing masks. And the only place that you could take your mask off was in your hotel room. If a second you stepped outside, you're throwing a mask on. So the only time you could take your mask off was in your hotel room. And the smoke from the fires in Oregon was so bad. We were in Seattle, and the hotel ventilation system was pulling in smoke, and we were wearing our masks in our hotel rooms, which was the only place we were allowed to take it off. And we actually had to leave, and we moved some games that were scheduled to be in Seattle, and we played in I believe Oakland or maybe it was San Francisco and San Diego, for the simple fact that was where the air quality was good enough that you could run around outside. So yeah, I mean, everyone has their 2020 COVID story. So I'm sure I'm not necessarily saying anything that anyone else can't talk about, but I do think that 2020 was a great time for self-reflection. I also think it was something with remote working and like the take up of Zoom, like Zoom really shrunk the world. We can have
100%.
conversations like this that we couldn't have 5 years ago because we didn't have this as kind of an accepted way to communicate. I just think the ability to find, smart, intelligent, sharp, like-minded people and have interesting conversations. That's one of the things that I do believe came out of COVID in 2020 is video calls have really shrunk the world and allowed us to reach out in a way that we were never capable of doing before. And I think that's something I've tried to take advantage of as much as I can, starting with, conversations just like this one.
Yeah, 100%. Like I started hosting a podcast would have been 2018, I believe, and I never did video. And then I think it would have been March or April of 2020. I was like, well, why don't I do like a panel thing and then like people can come and be like ask questions in the chat or whatever. And it was like the first time I did video.
Right.
And then
Right.
now I'm like, I can't talk to anyone without video anymore.
Right. And it saves travel. And I mean, the face-to-face still has value, but when you're in different time zones or you're in different states or you're in different cities, like the ability to just kind of hop on a call and have a good conversation. As I said, it really has shrunk the world. At the same time, it's expanded the number of people that we can talk to. It's just a matter of making sure that you're vetting it the right way and picking the right conversations.
Absolutely. Joe, one of the questions about this show is really about bringing the MIT community together. And so I will ask two parts of this. One is, what are you working on that the MIT community can support you with? And then the other half is, how would you like to support the MIT community who's listening to this show? So let's start with your goal and how can the MIT community support you?
Great question. I think, again, for me at this stage in my career, it's about having interesting conversations with like minds that are working on challenging problems that they want to make their next achievement. And I've been really, really, again, fortunate to be able to have more of those conversations and set myself up to do that. And I've come to appreciate the quality of the MIT community more as I've gone through my career. I've actually used my degree more. I didn't learn how to tell a curveball from a slider in a class at MIT when I first started scouting. But I realized as I moved up the ladder about strategic thinking and being able to plan and budgeting and staffing and team dynamics. And I used my business degree a lot more. The further I got away from MIT, the more I found I used my degree. So I think the first one is just continuing to be able to use that degree with people that are looking to work on interesting problems. And I know MIT really attracts people who like to work on interesting problems. So I think that's the one I'm looking for coming in that direction. And I think for me helping, like I live outside Chicago. I've gone to a couple events with the local MIT alum. I am on the alumni list for the Sloan Career Development Office. I talk with students quite a bit. They have different industry segments that they break up to, and they do kind of a sports, media, and entertainment. I think there's 3 or 4 of us. The other 2 or 3 are in media and entertainment. I'm the one that actually was in sports for quite a while. So I get a lot of contact from people that are at Sloan that are looking to try and get into sports. I know the MIT, they have a sports analytics. Sloan has a sports analytics conference every year. I've been fortunate to speak at that twice. Actually, my first one was when they had it it was held in 10250. It was the second year they did it. It was still in the lecture hall, and now they do it at the Boston Convention Center, and there's ESPN, ESPN's a sponsor, and they have, a lot bigger names that they do that with now, but I've spoken at that twice. And again, I just think there's such an interesting range of conversations, a range of people affiliated with it in both directions, and what MIT can do for you and what you can do for MIT, and just staying involved with that. And again, the beauty of Zoom, I've probably spoken with a half dozen Sloanies at some different, point in time in the couple of years I've been doing this, maybe more than that, probably close to 10. And it's just been something where they all have something a little bit different about it, but they're all trying to go in a similar direction. And I was really fortunate. I had people that helped me when I was at that stage of my journey, and kind of pay it forward and give something back. Look forward to doing that.
Awesome. If you want to reach out to Joe, I've dropped his LinkedIn in the podcast notes, as well as you can check out his website, jbexecutivecoach.com. That's also in the podcast notes too, so you can find him there. Joe, is there anything you want to leave our listeners with, like a nugget of wisdom that they can take with them for today?
You know what? I'll say this. I'll just go back to something I said earlier, I guess. When you're leading a team, or even with yourself, if you're leading a company, you're leading an organization, the easiest way to create a successful culture is to just coalesce around the goal of getting a little bit better every day, just kind of continuous improvement. And the reason for that, especially early, is that even if people have differences in motivations or differences in incentives, that goal will still achieve everyone's agenda. If you want to make more money, get a little bit better every day. You want a bigger title, get a little bit better every day. You want to create a legacy, get a little bit better every day. You want to take care of your family, get a little bit better every day. So even as you're maybe coalescing around what the core values are, especially with startups, because I know there's a lot of startups in the MIT space, as you're coalescing around what your core values might be, if you can just set a culture of just getting better every day, regardless of the values coming in, that will meet all the individual incentives until you kind of have your collective or come to your collective set of values and things that you're looking to achieve. So I think the nugget for me is no matter where you are in your individual journey, or where you are with your company, or where you are in leading a team, if you can just start with the idea of trying to be better today than you were yesterday, I think that allows you to branch off into all those other things to strengthen not only your foundation or strengthen your floor, but also put you in a better position to reach your ceiling or raise your ceiling, whatever that ceiling might be.
Love it. Everybody out there, get better every day. Trust the process.
And it takes what it takes.
And it takes what it takes, right? Joe, thank you so much for joining us. That was a really fun interview. And yeah, I look forward to continuing the conversation.
All right. Well, I appreciate the invitation. Again, hope the listeners got something out of it. And yeah, look forward to the next chat wherever that might be. So thanks again for the invitation. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. And everybody listening, thank you so much for listening. And we'll see you all next week.
Thank you.